Welcome, everyone. How many of you have ever sat down to work on a big task, feeling motivated, only to find yourself checking social media, making a coffee, or doing just about anything but that task? You're not alone. Procrastination is a universal struggle. We often think the key to focus is to lock ourselves in a room and power through one thing at a time, right? We block out distractions and try to maintain laser focus on that single goal. Today, I want to suggest that our intuition about the best way to focus might actually be leading us astray. Over the next hour, we will explore a powerful, often counterintuitive strategy to not only combat procrastination, but also enhance your focus and learning. Interleaving. We'll dive into why switching between tasks can be surprisingly effective, how it can help overcome procrastination, and most importantly, how you can start using it today to accomplish more with less mental fatigue. Part 1. The Science of Switching. Understanding interleaving. Think about how we often approach studying for exams. Many of us dedicate entire blocks of time to one subject, then move on to the next. This is called blocking. For example, spending 3 hours solely on algebra, then 3 hours solely on history. Now, imagine a different approach, spending an hour on algebra, then an hour on history, then back to algebra, and so on. This is interleaving, mixing different subjects or tasks within a single study or work session. The video we watched beautifully illustrated why interleaving can be so powerful. When you block practice, things can feel easier in the short term. You get into a rhythm, and it feels like you're making rapid progress. However, this fluency can be deceptive. Your brain isn't working as hard to differentiate between concepts or actively retrieve information. Interleaving, on the other hand, forces your brain to work harder. When you switch between different types of problems or tasks, your brain has to discriminate, figure out which type of problem or task you're currently facing, recall the relevant strategies and information needed for that specific task. This extra mental effort, while it might feel a bit slower or more challenging initially, leads to much stronger long-term learning and retention. It's like the difference between passively reading and actively quizzing yourself. Think about learning a new dance sequence. If you repeat the same few steps over and over again for an hour, you might nail it in that session, but come back the next day and you might struggle to remember it. However, if you practice a few different sequences in the same session, your brain has to work harder to keep them separate, leading to better recall later. Part 2. Why our brains love variety. Combating boredom and enhancing engagement. 15 to 30 minutes. Now, let's connect this to procrastination. Why do we procrastinate? Often it's because the task feels overwhelming, boring, or we hit a mental roadblock. Staring at the same type of problem or the same section of a report for hours on end can lead to mental fatigue and a strong urge to do something else. Anything else. Interleaving can be a natural antidote to this. By switching between different tasks, you introduce novelty and variety into your work or study session. This can reduce boredom. Jumping to a different subject or a different aspect of a project can reignite your interest and prevent that feeling of monotonous drudgery that often triggers procrastination. Enhance engagement. The active retrieval and discrimination required by interleaving keep your brain more engaged. You're not just going through the motions. You're constantly having to think and adapt. Provide mental breaks without total distraction. Switching tasks can act as a mini mental break from the previous one. You're still being productive, but you're giving a different part of your brain a workout. Imagine you're writing a report. Instead of trying to write the entire introduction in one go, you could write a paragraph of the introduction, then work on outlining the next section. Then maybe do some research for a different part of the report, and then come back to the introduction. This keeps the process dynamic and less likely to become a daunting, procrastination-inducing mountain. Part 3. The Interleaving Toolkit. Practical strategies for your work and study. So, how do you actually implement interleaving? Here are some practical strategies. For students, mix subjects during study sessions. Instead of dedicating entire days to single subjects, try studying different subjects in shorter blocks within the same day. For example, an hour of math followed by an hour of science, then an hour of history. Vary problem types. Within a single subject, don't just do all the easy problems first, then all the hard ones. Mix them up. This forces you to actively decide which strategy to use for each problem. Review material in a mixed order. When reviewing notes or flashcards, shuffle them instead of going through them in the order you learned them. For professionals, alternate between different project tasks. If you're working on a multifaceted project, switch between different aspects of it. For example, spend an hour on writing, then an hour on data analysis, then an hour on communication or planning. Interleave high focus and lower focus tasks. If you have a demanding task that requires deep concentration, intersperse it with less cognitively taxing tasks like answering emails or organizing files. This allows your brain to recover slightly without completely derailing your productivity. Schedule switch points. Plan specific times to switch tasks. This helps you avoid getting stuck in one rut for too long and ensures you're making progress on multiple fronts. Part 4. Overcoming the initial resistance and fine-tuning your approach. Interleaving might feel a little uncomfortable at first. Our intuition tells us that focusing on one thing until it's done is the most efficient approach. You might feel like you're not making as much immediate progress on any single task. Here are a few tips for overcoming this initial resistance and finding the right balance. Start small. Don't try to overhaul your entire routine overnight. Begin by interleaving just a couple of tasks or subjects for shorter periods. Trust the process. Remember that the initial feeling of slower progress can be deceptive. The long-term benefits for retention and focus are worth it. Find your optimal switching frequency. There's no magic number for how often you should switch. Experiment to find what works best for you and the types of tasks you're working on. Some tasks might require longer blocks of focused attention, while others lend themselves well to more frequent switching. Be mindful of task switching costs. While interleaving is beneficial, switching too rapidly between completely unrelated and complex tasks can lead to a temporary dip in performance as your brain readjusts. Aim for a reasonable balance. Conclusion and action planning. The key takeaway from our session today is that when it comes to focus and productivity, sometimes mixing things up is the most focused thing you can do. Interleaving leverages the way our brains learn and engage with information, helping us combat procrastination, enhance retention, and ultimately achieve our goals more effectively. Your action plan for the next week is simple. Experiment with interleaving. Choose one or two areas of your work or study where you can start incorporating this strategy. Observe how it affects your focus, your motivation, and your overall progress. Don't be afraid to break free from the tyranny of the single task block. Embrace the mix. Give your brain the variety it craves and unlock a new level of focus and productivity. Thank you for your time and engagement today. I encourage you to put the power of interleaving to work for you.